Like the colors in the rainbow, so too are the gays of our lives. Hi, my name is Sean Connell, and I am the president of the Fall River Pride Committee. Today we are here on Gays of Our Lives to do a little segment that's going to be as educational as it is lighthearted, to really start diving into the issues of the LGBTQ community, some events that we have coming up for Pride Committee, and some other things that come up along the road as we start our discussions. Today we really want to kind of do a 101 series to kind of start helping people understand what are all these letters mean, right? You hear all these letters, LGBTQ, IIA, A+, and all of these things. So we want to kind of help navigate that today, and I'm joined here today by a guest that I have. His name is Justin Lowrey, and I'll let him do a quick introduction, and then we will jump into our segment today.
Quick introduction.
A quick introduction. Who are you and why are you here today?
I am Justin Lowrey, and I am currently Mr. LGBT Fall River for the next month and a half.
Yeah.
And I am a huge advocate for the LGBT community. Yeah. I work a lot with the Fall River Pride Committee as well as other networks in the area to help educate people on what we are and what we do, and try to help youths and people who are trying to discover themselves and figure out who they are.
Brilliant, yeah. So a little background about me. I've worked actually at Greater Fall River Recreation as a program specialist. I also have a background in gender studies. This is why when I was coming up and I knew I was queer, I didn't know what that really meant. And so for me, learning about gender studies and learning about all of these letters really kind of helped me understand who I was. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a really important topic today because I think there are a lot of issues within the news, a lot of things being talked about around LGBT people, the bills in Florida and Texas. What is gender affirming care? What does it mean to not say gay? All of these kind of issues that are coming up. So we'll start with the basics, right? What does LGBT stand for? LGBT is the basic lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. A lot of times you'll often see it added with a Q, and Q usually stands for queer, which is kind of a take back of a word that was used kind of against gay people for a really long time. You can sometimes also see the Q as questioning, those people who are questioning their identity. What does it mean to be gay? What does it mean to be bi? What does it mean to have a gender identity? What does all that mean, that questioning?
Is there a difference between queer and questioning?
Yeah, so queer is usually something that people generally take on as a term as they kind of find themselves outside of the strict left-right ideas of what it means to be gay or straight, boy or girl, right? So when we talk about these things, there's two different identities, right? We tend to conflate them because we don't always understand, but there's two separate schools of thought within LGBT studies, right? And that's your sexuality, which is who you choose to have relationships with, and there's your gender identity, which is the relationship that you have with yourself and your own body. So within those there's spectrums. It's not one or the other. The LGBT, all our letters, what they're trying to advocate for is breaking down of binaries, right? For instance, a term you might hear is called non-binary. I actually identify as non-binary myself, where I don't feel wholly male, I don't feel wholly female. I come up somewhere in the middle as a Sean, right? So, so there's a lot of variation and understanding of these letters and how they relate to modern times. What happened in the last 20 to 40 years or so, there are sub-breakdowns within LGBT, right? Because bisexual can be limiting. Bisexual means you generally have attraction to men and females. But there are trans people and non-binary people who you can also have attraction to. There's also how we form those attractions, right? A lot of people kind of tend to forget that there's different types of levels of romanticism. How do you want to form a relationship in a family? And what we in the community try to understand is that love is love, right? It's one of our big slogans, love is love. Because there's no wrong way to form a family. There's no wrong way to kind of form those bonds. Right. Traditionally, right, there's a male and a female in a monogamous relationship. But LGBT people, we tend to form our families in different ways. There's polyamory, where you can be coupled with other couples, where you can have multiple people or multiple partners within one family group. right? And we don't find anything lewd about this. This is not, we're not going down to kindergarten classes and talking about porn, right? Which is some of the fear that we see here right now. What this is really about is the concepts of how we love ourselves, how we form relationships and love our bodies, and how we love other people, right? That's really what this stuff gets into. And I think that there needs to be a lot more understanding of this, because right now there's a lot of fear.
Right.
So that's why there's a big reason why we're doing this show, right? I'm here. I was born and raised in Fall River. I've worked here my entire life. I'm out and proud, and I'm there to have people ask me questions. I'm there to kind of be someone to kind of have those awkward conversations with.
Right.
But something I always like to note when I have these conversations is I think you need to find the people like me, like you, who are out and able and willing to talk about this stuff. I think what happens is people will ask people that they just met really personal things.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, well, why are you so sensitive about this? Because it's deeply personal things, right? Like talking about my body parts, talking about who I want to form family and sexual relationships with. Those are personal things, right? So there needs to be a little bit more decorum in the way people go about asking these things, right? Because have you ever been asked any awkward questions about your sexuality or gender identity?
I mean, generally, I think the biggest thing that I get is always, oh, I couldn't tell that you were attracted to men. And for me, it bothers me every time, because I'm like, well, I mean, what difference does it make? Like, why does that really matter? What am I supposed to act like? How am I supposed to be? Is there a way that I'm supposed to conform as soon as I identify the way I do? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, so. I definitely think there's a very much so a cookie cutter understanding of that. Like, I'm the gay guy, right? Because I'm bright pink and I'm wearing a butterfly scarf and all of these things. But again, we're conflating two different things. The first time I was actually called, the big F word in the community, a faggot, I was 6. I was 6 years old, right? So this is why when people are like, oh, well, we can't talk to kids about this. But if I was young enough to be bullied with this word, including by members of my own family, I think that there needs to be age-appropriate ways to have conversations about this, because I started to develop my gender identities and my sexualities at a younger age. That doesn't mean I want to be sexualized, right? There's a big difference here, because that was me forming my gender identity when I was a kid. I really liked pink. I liked Barbies. I wanted to wear dresses, right? None of that had anything to do with my sexuality. That was actually my gender expression. And because my gender expression was feminine, I was assumed to be gay. Right now, grew up and I ended up being a gay male, right, who was attracted to other men, which I would use the label gay for that. But you have to understand that that's not every single person's development, right? You're, if I can be honest, like, you tend to be a more masculine-looking guy. So we're like, oh, how could you be gay if you're more masculine? You have a beard and all of these things, right? So I think there has to be a little bit more of a broadening of understanding. And again, it goes back to why we're doing the show, why we chose LGBT 101 as our first topic. Because I think that the stereotyping can be a little bit damaging to any community, but particularly here, because it's not just about sexuality. I know feminine men, very feminine men, more effeminate than me even, who are heterosexual. I know very masculine women who are also heterosexual, right? I know very feminine women who are lesbian. So the gender identity and our sexuality cuts across a lot of spectrums. And it's a lot of different things all at once. And it's stuff that we develop over time. I think working with youth development, I know there's a lot of tendency to tell kids it's a phase, right? Which can be kind of damaging too. Like, us queer adults, we were queer children, right? So I think there needs to be more understanding that while it's not necessarily it's not a phase, we do go through phases of understanding ourselves, right? Where we start to kind of morph and figure out more of who we are. That's part of how I landed on binary for myself. I personally don't want to transition, but there are people who do want to transition.
I think that's something that really bothers me too, is that you hear a lot, oh, it's a phase, or if you go on social media, a lot of times people would be like, well, back in my day, people weren't exposed to this kind of thing. Back in my day, we didn't have this. And I think that that's the reason why we have the stigmas we do today. And I feel like these conversations need to be had. And I feel like, expressing yourself and explaining these things to everyone, children and adults, and being educational about it is going to help us evolve, as humans.
Yeah.
So.
I think, so something I always I've heard recently is that trans people didn't exist until recently, that it's a Tumblr phase. I literally have heard this. You have to understand, the first documented case of sexual reassignment was in the 1920s. Right? There was actually a documentary with a docu-movie with Eddie Redmayne recently called The Danish Girl that talks about that exact case. Right? During the 1940s, there was an entire museum of sexuality that talked about LGBT people in Germany, right, that was burned by the Nazis.
Right.
So our history and the LGBT history runs so much deeper. The issues there were often cultural or societal,
right,
where it was considered deviant or wrong.
Right.
Right, but it wasn't always like that. There was lots of other cultures, ancient cultures, who have a lot of different respects and reverence for different gender identities. For instance, Native Americans, they've talked a lot about two-spirited folk, right? People who are able to walk between the paths of both masculine and feminine were seen as almost more divine because they were able to more fully envelop and understand human existence from both the yin and the yang perspectives.
Right.
Right? So I think there's a danger in calling it a phase with kids, because there are a lot of kids who are struggling with this.
Right.
So I think that's why we have to have more of these shows, just to kind of have fun and talk about these in a forum that allows conversation.
Absolutely.
In a forum that is safe, and in a forum that lets people who are not trying to be hateful but don't understand, but they don't want to ask questions because they don't want to come off as hateful or offensive. Right. I think there's a lot, I don't know, I've experienced this a lot, where people, they don't know how to ask me questions. And I always get the preface, I always get, well, can I ask you a question? And then they'll, it'll be something silly or something, right? When we had drag queen story time at the library, and there was a woman there who didn't really understand. She was worried about bringing her grandkids there, so she wanted to check it out first. But she wanted to check us out, the Pride Committee, who are these people doing this event.
Right.
And, she came up to me, and you remember, she asked if I pee standing or sitting down. And I think that was her way of asking me if I was a boy or a girl, because I don't think she really understood how to appropriately ask that. And so I explained to her, if you need to know what I have or who I am, I will tell you. But it goes back to that lesson I talked about before, like, make sure you have rapport, or it's someone who's willing to have that
Right.
conversation with you.
Could you imagine
before you
going
ask
to a
that.
grocery store and just walking up to somebody and saying, "Excuse me, do you pee standing up or sitting down?"
Yes. And then this is why when people are like, oh, well, why are people so sensitive? I'm like, because it's a personal question, right? Like, that's a personal question. And so I talked to her, and then at the end, though, she was like, this was actually a really cool event, and I see that it was just about, reading stories, and that it wasn't lewd, it wasn't pornographic, right? Because there's a big cultural debate right now about drag and drag queen story time specifically. I mean, I know you people out there have seen the Fall of a Reporter articles about this, where the comments are a battleground, honestly.
They are.
Right? Where there's a lot of people who truly think that it's about grooming children, that it's about indoctrination, that it's about us being mentally ill and all of these things.
Right.
Why LGBT people would find that offensive? Remember, being gay was listed as a disease until 2004, right? It took that long for them to figure out that it's a sexual experience within humanity,
Right.
and not a mental disorder.
Well, it's interesting too, because it's not just the heterosexual community that is attacking drag queen storytime. I know that Taunton is hosting one this coming weekend, and I was reading the posts on the Taunton Gazette, and there was a gay man on the post that was referencing another drag queen that's against drag queen storytime, and said that drag queens are only supposed to be sexualized, and they're lewd, and they're all about drugs, and that's really not the case. If you've ever seen anybody like the Imperial Court of Rhode Island, for example, they're a very regal group, they're very professional, and they do a lot for the community. And it's not always about that sexualization or that over dramatization of femininity, and sometimes they just like to be pretty, sometimes they just like to dress up. And the ones that do the story time, that I've experienced, I can't speak on every story time everywhere, But the ones that I've experienced, it's always the same, where they come in, they're very professional, they look, they come in as a character. They come in and read to these children so that they can, help these children identify who they are as people. And it's not necessarily they're trying to teach these children that everybody should be a drag queen, because that's not the case. It's just they're saying that you can express yourself however you want, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and for those of you guys who might not know, generally speaking, not all the time, drag queens are usually cisgender gay men. So cisgender meaning that they are male and they feel male and they're male-bodied, and that they are attracted to men, right? And they do drag usually as a performance art, right? Because there's a lot of things that go into it. You guys watch America's Next Top Model. You guys watch Project Runway. Drag queens do a lot of that stuff. They do their own hair, their own makeup, their own outfits, and they put these personas together. There's a difference between, if you're gonna go to a bar or a club at midnight, you're gonna see, funny jokes or lewd jokes. You're already 18 or 21 plus to get in there.
Right.
At a library during story time, we're gonna read books. Like, that's what we do. We do crafts, right? We're about identity, about what it means to be different, that it's okay to be different, that we need to respect and celebrate differences.
Right, and the drag community has actually evolved a lot since, the beginning. There are drag kings now. There are AFAB drag queens, kings. AMAB, which is assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth. The spectrum is so much wider now than it was before, and I think a lot of people don't even realize that. I know that at the club that I work at, we've hired everybody on that drag spectrum, and they're all equally entertaining. They all, have the same common goal, and that's that they like to entertain, and they like to do things the way they do things, and they like to express themselves differently than they do in everyday life, and that's really, the point. So.
And I think that's a really important distinction for people to understand, right? Because people always go back to that, well, it's boy versus girl, you a boy or a girl. And drag queens kind of throw that notion out the window.
Right.
Like, well, I'm a male, but I do female impersonation as a job. I'm a female, but I do male impersonation as a job.
Right.
Right? Because that's the artistic performance space where we as a culture have evolved to, right? We have the space for everybody, and we can do this in a way that is also educational.
Right.
So that's why a lot of drag queens have kind of come out of the clubs to do events like Drag Queen Storytime to increase literacy, right? We've read books like King Alice or Julian is a Mermaid, titles that you guys can totally look up.
That's the penguin one.
Tango Makes Three.
I like that one.
It's so cute, right? Because that goes back to that whole concept of LGBT families are valid and legitimate.
Right.
It is not lewd to say this family has two daddies or this family has two mommies.
Right.
Just like you would tell a kid your mommy and your daddy.
Right.
Right? Because it's not what it's been being made out to be. Because what I think that a lot of that comes from a historical place of moral deviance, that there's something wrong with it.
Right.
But what psychology and sociology, what we've kind of learned over the years is that it's a naturally occurring phenomenon within society. Every single culture across the world, have LGBT people in different ways. I remember when I was 8, I think one of the reasons I'm really good at this is because my mom. And when I was 8, my mom caught me cutting up her sheets making dresses. And again, that wasn't a sexual thing. I thought I looked super cute. I made dresses. But I was really blessed to have her. She sat me down and she talked to me that, in Scotland, they wear skirts called kilts. Men wear skirts, right? In Southeast Asia, there were legitimate performances where who could fool the judges the best with gender bending, right? I don't remember the term for that, but there's a whole culture for that. So there's all these kind of cultural things across, thousands of languages across hundreds of countries that have elements of being LGBT.
Right.
And it's not automatically lewd.
Right.
It's not automatically the drag queen at 1 a.m. at a bar, right? Which is, which can be silly and ridiculous. But again, that's the difference in knowing your time and place and your audience.
Right.
All the queens I've ever seen do for Drag Queen Storytime were nothing but appropriate. They were professional. And the kids had a really good time. They laughed. They talked about their favorite colors.
Right.
They talk about, I have a cousin who's autistic. I have a cousin who's in a wheelchair. I have, a brother who is deaf. I have different ethnicities within my family.
Right.
I have a black mom and a white dad.
Right.
All these things that have been considered different or wrong over time, we learn to see for what it is,
right.
which is just a normal variation of the weird human existence.
Right.
That's the big part of this.
Fair.
So the last kind of things that I will go on before we're gonna jump into some of our events in a minute here. But how do you feel about some of these other new letters, these LGBTQIA? How do you feel about some of that?
I have to be honest.
Be real.
I'm confused. I mean, I feel like you can be in the community and still not have an understanding. I mean, there are letters that I don't even know exist. I think there's a number in there somewhere. I try as hard as I can to be, knowledgeable so that if anybody ever asks me, I can tell them. But a lot of it is still kind of new to me and fresh, and I'm still learning. And I'm not ashamed of that. But there are ones that I don't understand. There are ones that I don't know. So, and I believe that ally is on that list now too.
Yep, we can put allies. Yep.
So what are the other, what are some of the other ones that exist?
So
we talked about lesbian, we talked about gay, bisexual, trans,
queer questioning.
Yep. Ally. There's
ally.
an I, right? What's the
There's
I?
I is intersex.
And what is I don't know what that is.
So intersex is kind of reclaiming a term. The olden term for that is hermaphroditism.
Okay.
Or being a hermaphrodite, where there are people who can be born with both parts. They can be born with glands or body parts that are both male and female.
Right.
A lot of times what happens with intersex people when they're born, parents make a decision to cut something here or trim something here that will generally make them more male or more female biologically.
Okay.
But what we're talking about when we talk about gender identity is that biology, our 8th grade kind of understanding of boy-girl biology is not the end-all be-all.
Right.
There's intersex is what really kind of blows the lid off of that.
Right.
Right, because there is so much more to our bodies and then how we physically express it to the world through our clothing, through our mannerisms, through all those other kind of things that then form our gender identity on top of what's called epi. It's an epi effect, where it's on top of our biology. So on top of our biology, there's then how an intersex person might decide how to be male or female, right? As they kind of go into themselves. There's also asexual is one of the other A's that we'll hear, which talks about how much attraction do you have with somebody. Right? Do you even want to have sexual attraction? For a long time, people assumed if you had no sexual attraction whatsoever, that was something wrong. But there's not anything wrong with that. There's also what's called demisexual, where there are people who only form relationships with people when they feel like they have a connection. Right? So we can talk a little bit more about this too, because I want to get into some other things over the weeks of gays of our lives, where we'll talk more about this stuff, where we'll look at questions and comments from you guys out there in the audience around, okay, well, what I've heard about this term, or I heard about this term. I have a degree in gender studies, and I also have not heard of all the terms. Right? If you look up pride flags, right, there's like 60, right? So there's a ton of them. We're actually going to be flying a bunch of those at our Pride Festival coming up. So I wanted to actually kind of segue here into some amazing events that we have coming up in June.
Right, welcome everybody to the Fall River Annual Pride Festival. I want to thank every single person who's going to be coming. We have 30 tabling organizations here. We have 3 food trucks. We have some drag performers who are going to knock your socks off. Have some fun, grab a bite to eat, and happy Pride, everybody.
Let me tell you, it's hot.
Pause for effect here with some amazing footage of our Pride from last year. Our first event coming up for the Fall River Pride Committee is a fundraiser. Do you want to talk a little bit about our fundraiser?
Yeah, so on Tuesday, the 17th, we are going to be at Barrett's in Fall River, Barrett's Ale House. They are doing a fundraiser for us where 10% of the food sales are going to go towards the Fall River Pride Committee and Fall River Pride. So we will actually also be tabling at the event with the Pride Committee. We're going to have raffle baskets. We're going to do some giveaways. We have some swag, and we will also be obviously advertising other events that we're going to be hosting. But the bottom line is going to Barrett's and having a meal, and 10% of that sale going to the Pride Committee for our Pride event. So.
We have an adorable tagline, so we don't have a website yet. We're working on it. But you can find us on Facebook at Fall River Pride Committee, and our event is called There's No Place Like Barrett's fundraiser. We're really excited about that, so we hope to see you there. And then just 2 weeks after that, it's June.
Yeah.
And for those of you guys in the know, June is LGBT Pride Month. There's actually some history about that we can talk about in another episode, why June. It was the starts of some of the gay rights movement here in America. But we kick it off here in Fall River on June 1st. We have a flag raising at City Hall. The flag raising will be held at 4 p.m. You'll see me. You'll probably see some of my other committee members, some local officials talking about why raising the pride flag matters. We'll also be raising some of those other pride flags that we talked about over at Gramada Plaza, right on South Main Street, to really start kind of kicking off the month.
And it's going to be a busy month.
It's going to be a busy month. Then it never stops from there. It just never stops. We have a million events for people to attend if they're interested in. So our partners at the South Coast LGBT Network, they are hosting New Bedford Pride. Do you want to talk a little bit about New Bedford Pride?
So New Bedford Pride is going to be held on Saturday, June 4th, and it is from 11 to 3, I believe, in Buttonwood Park. Yeah. They're going to have vendors. They're going to have music. There'll be dancing. There'll be performances. And I believe other people will be tabling, local businesses and whatnot. And I mean, of course, it's basically going to be the same, I think, all around for every Pride event where there will be vendors and tables and raffles and prizes and performances.
Overall, a lot of fun. That's what we're talking about.
And it's all family friendly. It's all, everybody is welcome. And I think that it's very educational too. So if, you do want to experience the life in the LGBT community, I think that that's a great way to do it because everybody is very welcoming and we have a lot of fun and it's good for everyone.
So then if you are over 21 and you want to kind of have an adult night out, that night, June 4th, starting at 8 p.m. in downtown Fall River, the Fall River Pride Committee, we're hosting a pub crawl at some of our local establishments downtown, including Dunny's, the Belmont Club, Tequila Lime, Scotty's, and St. James. We're going to have a lot of fun doing all of that. Then the next day will be Fall River Pride Festival, which would be the same kind of fun and jubilant performances, tables, food trucks, right? Vendors, places, things to buy at.
Drag performances.
Just general performances. It'll be an incredible time. So that's Sunday, June 5th.
Yes.
And the parties doesn't stop that week. Would you want to talk just a minute about the prom that Friday?
So then on the 10th, we will have our first ever Fall River Pride Committee prom. It's an adult prom, so it is for 18 plus. Yep. You'll be able to take your picture. Of course, there'll be a DJ, there'll be food, and it is going to be Wizard of Oz themed, as is our bar crawl, as is our Pride event. We are going Wizard of Oz heavy this year, so that's going to be exciting. I believe the time that we set was
7 to 11.
7 to 11. Tickets are $30. We will have a page set up, I believe, on Facebook. Once again, our Facebook page, Fall River Pride Committee. Make sure that you check it out, and you can buy tickets there, or you can buy tickets at the door, and it's going to be a good time.
And then, last but not least, for our folks who might be up in Taunton, Taunton Pride is having their first inaugural Pride this year. 12 to 5 on Saturday, June 11th at Hopewell Park. Hopewell Park. It also is looking to be an amazing event, so we're really excited to kind of support that as well.
And there'll be an after party.
After party
at Bobby's Place in Taunton.
21 plus for that.
21 plus for that, and that is from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. I believe Taunton Pride is going to be hosted by Lady Sabrina, who is a Worcester performer. She's fantastic. Oh, and we didn't even talk about crowning our new court.
We would be remiss in our last minute here. So, as you guys know, this is my Mr. LGBT Fall River, but the Pride Committee, unfortunately, they were working today because they're amazing citizens. I have Angel, who is our Mix MX, which talks about a little bit different pronouns, LGBT Fall River, and I have my Miss Fall River, who is Kim Fusion, an amazing DJ and performer who also works full-time and couldn't be here today. And of course, Justin here, my Mr. LGBT Fall River. And the idea of prom this year is we're going to have the Royal Court be named at prom.
That's right.
So we're going to have an application online soon for people who are interested in one of those positions.
Yes.
And then, of course, my amazing court will all be at hand at prom to pass over the sashes and crowns of their titles.
Yes.
And I'm so proud of our court and what they've been able to accomplish this last year. I'm so proud of what the committee is doing. I think one of our other slogans here with our partners at the South Coast Network is Forever Proud.
Right.
Because we are here in the community. Pride is not just about being lewd, it's about being able to exist in a public space as our authentic selves.
And if you're watching this, make sure that if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments section of whatever you're watching this from, and we will answer those questions, or you will answer those questions on your next show.
I'll be back. Yeah, we'll be back again. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. This has been an incredible conversation. I want to keep the conversation going on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel where this will be aired, and we'll address some of those questions next time we're in house. So thank you for joining us today here at the Gays of Our Lives, and we will explore the next colors of the rainbow in our next episode. Take care.